everyone, welcome back. So this is the fourth writing workshop, which is all about writing a setting description. So let's start by talking about what a setting description is. Well, it's exactly what it says on the tin. You are describing the place where your story is happening. And there are a number of different ways that you can do that, and there are lots of different features that you can include in this type of description. Try not to get it confused with telling the story, because although the setting description is an important part of your story, you're not actually continuing on with what's happening. You may walk through your setting to describe it a little bit more, and that might kind of help move the story along, but don't get it confused with actually just continuing to tell the story. Okay, so as always, we always say the best writing comes from a careful plan. So on the screen are two different types of planning sheets that you could use. If you want to just go straight at it with your own kind of plan, then that's great. But remember, it's important to do something like this first, because it prevents your writing from getting muddled, and it also allows you to make sure that you have thought of lots of different things that you could include. Not just the things that you can describe, but also the kinds of sentences that you might want to use. Reminds you to plan for those things. Okay, so as always, vocabulary is important. Make sure that you are trying to up-level the kinds of words that you are using. Again, things like online dictionaries and thesauruses, completely free, easy to get onto and have a look. It might be that you do your writing first and then you look for an adjective or an adverb where you don't feel like you've quite described it as well as you could have done, and then you can Google that word or search it on an online dictionary or thesaurus to see if it can offer you any better suggestions. Remember, not every single word that you're going to get offered as a suggestion will work in place of the one that you've already used. You've just got to make sure that it makes sense. Okay, so what can I include? Well, the first thing that we always go to is the 5 senses. So what can you touch, what can you smell, what can you taste, what can you hear, and what can you see? All of those things allows your reader to feel like they are there. Okay, they're using all of their senses to try and imagine the story that you're creating. If you only use one of them, your reader wouldn't be able to imagine themselves being there quite as much, because they're only being given one way of thinking about being there. So the more of those that you can get in, the better your reader is immersed in your writing. Okay, what else can I include? So these are some of the things that you need to remember that you can describe. So obviously, like in the last part we've just talked about, things that are in sight, you physically need to describe where you are. You could also describe the weather. Now, we have had a little bit of a discussion about pathetic fallacy in the past, but I am going to do another video on that one. So basically, where the weather mimics the feelings of the character. So if your character's feeling really happy, you would probably set it in a nice sunny day. If your character is feeling really sad, it might be raining. So it's trying to create the link between those two things. How you feel about it as the character in your story. So how do they feel about the place that they're in, their emotions and their attitudes towards it? That's really important too. And it might be that if you are in a scary place, that you are building up suspense. Okay, so remember, different types of sentences can be used for that. So let's think about the kind of features that you can include. So again, looking at the TAF to help us out here, and we'll look at the child-friendly one to make that a little bit easier. Okay, so let's have a look at working towards the expected standard. So let's identify the purpose for writing. Now, obviously, because it's a setting description and it's part of a storytelling device, it's writing to entertain. So then we move across to the next bit, using paragraphs to organise ideas. Yes, definitely. Paragraphs will also help your character move through the piece of writing. So it might be that as you're moving through your setting to a new part of it, you start a new paragraph, or something new comes into sight, or something you can hear, start it in a new paragraph. Describing setting, obviously in a setting description. Describing character. You can still describe character, because as we've already talked about, I need to know what your character feels about being in the place that they're in, but don't get it confused and start describing the character in terms of its appearance, because it's not necessarily important in this kind of text. Devices to structure writing. So again, not all of those are appropriate. Things like fronted adverbials, definitely. Just gives your story a better way. Instead of starting it with I looked around, I did this, I stepped on this, I did this, it's much more effective to start it with an adverbial. Use mostly correctly capital letters, full stops, question marks, exclamation marks, commas for lists and apostrophes for contractions. all of those can be used in this text. Again, get out your spelling words, you can find them online to help you with those ones, and produce legible joined handwriting, definitely very important. Okay, so on the screen now you can see the kinds of things that you would want to include off that list. If you're making notes, you can add those to them now by pausing the screen, but if not, we'll move on and have a look at the next part. Atmosphere. Okay, so this is working at the expected standard. So creating atmosphere, definitely, especially if your setting is going to be a creepy setting, somewhere where you're building up suspense. So things like similes, metaphors and personification would be fantastic. If you're not sure what they are, I've made a video of those in the past, which I will link in to the description below, and also I'll put a little card in the top right corner now, so if you want to have a look at that, you can press on it. Speech to advance the action, yes, you can include it. You can include your character maybe just saying something out loud to themselves, or it might be that there's a bit of dialogue going on, but don't get too caught up in doing that, because remember, we are not telling the story, we are describing the setting. But if your character has something to say about the place, then that's fine. Spelling words we've talked about, joined handwriting, verb tenses consistently, so if you're writing about somewhere that you've been in the past, then stick in past tense. If you're writing as though you're there now, then obviously it's present tense. Cohesive devices we've talked about, so now we're looking at the correct use of parentheses, semicolons, colons and hyphens, all of which can definitely be used in this piece of writing. So let's add these to our list. Okay, so if you want to add this onto any list that you might be making, if you pause the screen now, you can write them down, and then we'll move on. All of the features. Okay, so again, greater depth, the last bit, this is the bit where you are showing the craft of your writing. So it's using all of the features we've talked about, but making sure that they are used appropriately and in the correct places. There are a couple more things here that you could look at, such as formal and informal text. So if your character is a child, for example, and you're getting them to say something, it would be more informal. Thinking about the levels of grammar that you use, and just making sure that you don't overuse something. So for example, if you know you're really good at similes, that's fantastic, but don't put lots and lots and lots of them in your work, because it just affects the flow of the writing. Okay, so here's a little example of part of a setting description. So have a pause, have a read through it, and then we'll talk about some of the things in there that we have used. Okay, so let's have a look at some of the text that's here. So we've got different conjunctions going on. So we've got as, just to make sure that we have got a variety. We don't want to be stuck using and all the time. So both coordinating and subordinating conjunctions would be good in this type of text. Not starting every sentence with I could hear this or I could see this. The only sound to be heard, the wind howled through the trees. So thinking about different ways of creating atmosphere. Small green leaves blew around the air like a lost balloon. So there we've got two adjectives separated by a comma, and then we've got blew around in the air like a lost balloon. So that is a simile there. Then we've got lost, confused, one-word sentences. Short sentences are probably one of the most effective things in terms of building up suspense in a piece of writing. And then we have got front adverbials such as although, there was no party here. So just remember thinking about starting your sentences in different ways. So remember, that's not a full one, that's just a tiny little piece of it. Mainly describing what can be heard and what can be seen. You could also describe what could be felt in terms of the wind on your face, but that's just a small example. So what can I write about? Now on the screen there are 6 different pictures that you could use to base your setting description on. They're all very different, so they would all require a different kind of setting description to be written. You can either do it as though you're writing about a character being in that place, or you could write about it as though you are that character in that place. It really doesn't matter either way. Now, if none of these pictures take your interest, there is a website called Pobble, which every day posts a brand new picture. So you could actually go on and have a look at today's, but they also have got previous days on there as well. These pictures that I've taken were mainly from Pobble. So what I'll do is I will put the link for Pobble 365 in the description below, but I will also put one in the top of the screen so that you can click onto it and go and have a look. But feel free to use these ones, but like I said, there are lots out there, so you can just have a flick through and see if there's one that takes your fancy.